Imagine this. You're sitting quietly, trying to relax after a long day, and suddenly that sound creeps in again. That ringing, that buzzing, that high-pitched whistle that no one else hears but you. It takes over the silence like an unwanted guest. And no matter what you do, cover your ears, shake your head, swallow, listen to music, it refuses to stop. Now, what if I told you that a 94-year-old doctor from Japan, one of the oldest practicing physicians in the world, has revealed a simple technique that can almost instantly quiet that ringing, sometimes in as little as 30 seconds? Sounds unbelievable, right? But stay with me, because today I'm going to walk you through exactly how he says to do it, why it works, and how thousands of people around the world have already tried it with surprisingly fast relief. Many people assume tinnitus comes from permanent ear damage, but the Japanese doctor explained that in a huge number of cases, the ringing sound is actually linked to tension in the jaw, neck, and especially the small muscles around the ear. These muscles are incredibly sensitive and tightly connected to the structures that regulate pressure inside the ear canal. When they tighten due to stress, poor posture, or repetitive habits like clenching the jaw or looking down at screens for hours, they create a subtle pull on the tissues that surround the ear. This tension interferes with how sound vibrations travel, how pressure is balanced, and how the brain interprets internal signals. Instead of processing normal quietness, the brain receives distorted signals that it translates into ringing or buzzing. The doctor often compares this to a tightly stretched rubber band. The more it pulls, the more noise or vibration it creates, and the same concept applies to the ears. The muscles that sit behind the skull and around the Eustachian tube can stiffen and restrict the natural movement of air inside the ear. As that pressure gets stuck, the ear becomes more sensitive, and the ringing becomes louder. He also explains that people who grind their teeth at night, clench their jaw during stress, or hold tension in their neck without realizing it, are far more likely to develop tinnitus that fluctuates or worsens throughout the day. This is because the temporomandibular joint, the jaw joint, sits extremely close to the middle ear. When it tightens or misaligns, the muscles surrounding it send tension upward toward the area behind the ear, creating a chain reaction of discomfort. Even small changes in muscle tone can create a noticeable change in the internal sound you hear. The doctor says this is why some people notice their tinnitus gets louder when they turn their head, chew, or stretch their jaw. These movements shift tension around the ear structures and temporarily change the internal pressure. What makes his perspective unique is that instead of viewing tinnitus as an isolated ear problem, he sees it as part of a bigger system involving posture, facial muscles, neck alignment, breathing patterns, and stress levels. He has treated thousands of patients and noticed that when people reduce tension around the skull base, their tinnitus often reduces as well, sometimes dramatically. He believes most people overlook how connected the upper body truly is. If the neck muscles become stiff from long hours at a desk, the base of the skull tightens. If the skull base tightens, the muscles behind the ear tense up. When those tense muscles press on the tissues around the ear canal, the signals to the brain become irregular, creating the sound people describe as ringing, buzzing, hissing, or whistling. According to him, the ringing isn't always a sign of damage. It's often a sign of imbalance. By addressing the tension itself, releasing it gently and consistently, the body can recalibrate the internal environment of the ear. This explains why his simple method works for so many people. It doesn't attempt to silence the ear. It releases the tension that was creating the noise in the first place. The doctor's 30-second technique works because it uses a very specific combination of gentle touch, controlled breathing, and a deliberate swallowing motion to create a shift in the structures that regulate pressure inside the ear. He explains that most people think the ear is a closed system, but it's actually directly connected to the throat through a tiny passage called the Eustachian tube. This tube opens and closes to balance the air pressure between the inner and outer parts of the ear. When the tube becomes stiff due to tension, stress, inflammation, or tight neck muscles, it doesn't open smoothly. This limited movement can create a feeling of fullness, pressure, and internal ringing. By using finger pressure behind the ears, the technique helps to relax the small muscles that sit right over the openings that connect to the Eustachian tube. These muscles often become tight without people realizing it, especially if their posture has been forward-leaning or if they regularly clench their jaw. When the fingers gently press into that soft curved bone behind the ear, the touch stimulates blood flow and encourages the surrounding muscles to loosen, reducing the pull that contributes to pressure imbalance. The breathing component of the technique is equally important. Slow, controlled inhaling sends signals to the nervous system that it's safe to relax, which reduces muscle tension around the skull. Most people breathe shallowly when they're stressed, and this tightens the muscles around the neck and upper back. A deep, slow breath helps reverse this tension. When you inhale while applying pressure behind the ears, the tissues expand slightly, and this expansion creates the space needed for the muscles to soften. When you exhale and lower your chin gently, it stretches the small muscles that often stiffen and restrict the Eustachian tube. The Japanese doctor says that these tiny adjustments can create a surprisingly large effect because the structures are so sensitive. Even a millimeter of change can help the internal passage open more efficiently. The final part of the technique, the controlled swallow with the tongue resting lightly against the roof of the mouth, is the moment that often creates immediate relief. Swallowing naturally opens the Eustachian tube, but most people swallow with tension. By relaxing the jaw, placing the tongue softly, and swallowing slowly, the motion becomes smoother and more effective. When combined with the pressure release from the first steps, this swallow helps the tube open cleanly, letting trapped air shift. Some people feel a tiny pop or click as this happens, while others notice a vibration or a small warmth inside the ear. That sensation is the internal pressure resetting. When pressure balances, the brain no longer receives distorted auditory signals, and the ringing often fades or becomes significantly softer. The doctor discovered through decades of practice that this sequence of steps, pressure, breath, swallow, creates the ideal environment for the ear to reset. It's not forceful, it doesn't require tools, and it aligns with the body's natural mechanics. By guiding the ear into a relaxed, balanced state, the technique helps people experience relief quickly, sometimes in as little as 30 seconds. Many people are surprised by how quickly they feel relief from this technique, and the Japanese doctor explains that it has everything to do with how sensitive the muscles around the ear and skull are. When these muscles tighten, even slightly, they create tension that interferes with how sound is processed internally. This tension doesn't just affect the ear itself, it affects the nerves that connect to the auditory system and the tissues that regulate air pressure inside the ear canal. When you apply gentle pressure to the area behind the ears and combine it with controlled breathing, those tiny muscles soften almost instantly. The body responds quickly because these muscles are not meant to stay tight for long periods. They are designed for subtle movements related to balance, jaw motion, and head posture. When they relax, even for a moment, the brain receives a more stable signal from the ear and the ringing naturally becomes quieter. The doctor says that many of his patients experience a sudden drop in their tinnitus volume because the technique interrupts the cycle of tension and misfiring signals. Tinnitus, caused by muscle tension, often behaves like a feedback loop. Tight muscles create pressure. Pressure creates distorted signals. Distorted signals create more stress, and more stress tightens the muscles again. The technique breaks this loop. By reducing the muscle tension around the skull base and Eustachian tube, the internal pressure begins to normalize. When pressure balances, the ear stops sending confusing signals to the brain. The brain, in turn, stops amplifying the noise. This is why some people describe it as if the ringing suddenly steps back, or fades into the background. They feel immediate relief because the source of irritation is reduced in real time. Another reason the technique works so fast is because it increases blood flow to an area that often becomes stagnant from poor posture or stress. When muscles around the ear are stiff, they restrict circulation. Limited blood flow can make the ear more sensitive and reactive. The gentle massage-like pressure stimulates circulation and brings warmth back into the area. That warmth is often felt within seconds, and it contributes to the relaxation response. When the tissues warm up, they loosen. When they loosen, the ringing softens. Many people report that just a few seconds of touching the pressure points behind the ears creates a sense of relief that spreads across the back of the head and down the neck. The Japanese doctor also explains that the brain plays a huge role in how loud tinnitus feels. When the body is tense, the brain goes into a heightened state of alertness. It becomes more aware of internal sounds, including ringing. The moment the technique triggers a relaxation response, the brain calms down. This shift allows the nervous system to stop magnifying the tinnitus. Even if the ringing doesn't disappear completely, the brain stops treating it as a threat, making it feel far quieter and less intrusive. This neurological change can happen within seconds, which is why the relief feels almost instant. People who use this method regularly notice that the more they practice it, the faster their body responds. Their muscles learn to relax more easily, their posture improves, their jaw becomes less tense, and their brain becomes less reactive to internal noise. This creates long-term improvement, but the most noticeable effect is always that first sudden drop in ringing. It feels dramatic because the body finally releases tension it has been holding onto for years. This is why the technique feels so powerful. It doesn't mask the tinnitus. It releases the root tension that was feeding it. The Japanese doctor emphasizes that while many people experience immediate relief the first time they try this technique, the real transformation comes from using it consistently. He has seen countless patients whose tinnitus didn't just fade temporarily, but became significantly less frequent and less intense over time because they practiced the method 2 or 3 times a day. Consistency matters because tinnitus, caused by tension, is a pattern, a physical pattern, a behavioral pattern, and often a stress pattern. When the muscles around the ear, jaw, and neck stay tight for years, the body treats this tension as the normal state. The brain adapts to these abnormal signals and becomes accustomed to interpreting them as sound. This is why the ringing can feel constant or unpredictable. But when you repeatedly use the technique, you train your body to return to a relaxed, balanced state, and the brain slowly learns to respond differently as well. The doctor explains that each time you perform the sequence, gentle pressure, slow breathing, and controlled swallowing, you are breaking the habit of tension. Muscles that have been locked for years begin to loosen little by little. A single session might relieve them for a few minutes or hours, but multiple sessions repeated daily create a new baseline. The tissues gradually become more flexible, the Eustachian tube opens more easily, and the area behind the ears becomes less reactive. This is why people who commit to the technique over a week or more often report that their tinnitus grows softer day by day. It is not because the technique is becoming stronger. It's because their body is learning to stay relaxed instead of snapping back into its tense state. He also notes that tinnitus linked to poor posture responds especially well to repetition. If someone spends hours each day working at a desk, tilting their head forward, or clenching their jaw when stressed, the muscles around the skull and upper neck tighten over and over again. Doing the technique just once cannot undo all that accumulated tension, but doing it regularly retrains the body. Eventually, the muscles stop pulling on the ear structures as aggressively, and the internal signals stop misfiring. This explains why many individuals find that their tinnitus becomes less noticeable throughout the day the more they practice. It's not about intensity, it's about repetition and body memory. Another reason consistency works is because it teaches the nervous system to stay calm. Tinnitus tends to get worse when the body is stressed because the brain becomes more sensitive to internal noise. The technique activates the relaxation response every time you practice it. If you do this 2 or 3 times daily, even for just a minute each time, your body gets repeated reminders to turn off the stress response. Over time, this reduces overall nervous system tension and the brain stops amplifying the ringing. People often don't realize that even a mild drop in daily stress can dramatically reduce tinnitus intensity. Repeating the method acts like a signal to your nervous system that it doesn't need to be in alert mode. The doctor says he has watched patients who initially felt only mild improvement, but within a week of consistent practice, noticed that their tinnitus episodes were shorter, quieter, and less emotionally distressing. Some even said they went entire days without noticing the ringing at all. It wasn't magic. It was repetition. The muscles slowly stopped compressing the sensitive areas around the ear. The pressure inside the ear stabilized more quickly. The brain stopped treating the ringing as something important or threatening. The more consistently people practiced, the more their internal systems shifted toward balance. And once the body finds its new balance, tinnitus no longer holds the same power it once did. Stress and posture are 2 of the most underrated factors when it comes to tinnitus, and the Japanese doctor often says that many people, unknowingly, make their symptoms worse simply by the way they hold their bodies or respond to daily pressures. When a person experiences stress, the body naturally tightens. The jaw clenches, the shoulders rise, the neck stiffens, and the muscles around the skull contract without the person even realizing it. These subtle physical reactions create tension in the exact areas that influence the ear's internal pressure. When this tension becomes habitual, the brain begins to interpret the internal muscle strain as sound, which is why stress often makes tinnitus louder, sharper, or more persistent. Many people notice that their ringing increases during stressful days, late at night when they're overthinking, or during times of emotional pressure. It's not imagined. It's the body responding to the nervous system's activation. Posture plays an equally important role because how you position your head and neck influences the delicate muscles around the ear. When someone spends hours leaning forward at a desk or looking down at a phone, their neck muscles pull on the base of the skull. This creates a chain reaction of tension that reaches the structures surrounding the ear canal. The Japanese doctor explains that this pressure can subtly distort how the ear equalizes sound and air, which leads the brain to receive irregular signals. These irregular signals often show up as ringing or buzzing. Poor posture compresses nerves, restricts blood flow, and stiffens the tissues that help regulate auditory balance. Over time, this becomes a cycle. Bad posture creates tension. Tension worsens tinnitus. Tinnitus causes stress, and stress increases tension even more. Because of this, pairing the 30-second technique with improvements in posture and stress reduction dramatically enhances the results. When the body is relaxed, the muscles behind the ears become more responsive and the Eustachian tube opens more easily. When the nervous system is calm, the brain stops amplifying internal sounds, making tinnitus feel softer or less intrusive. Even small adjustments, lifting the chin, relaxing the jaw, taking slow breaths, stretching the neck can create noticeable changes. The doctor often teaches patients simple daily habits, such as taking a few deep breaths before bed, gently massaging the neck muscles, or practicing the swallow technique after long screen sessions. These small behaviors reduce the overall tension that contributes to tinnitus. Many of his patients report that once they became aware of their posture and stress levels, the ringing not only decreased in intensity, but also became less frequent. This is because the body is no longer constantly triggering the same tightness that feeds the tinnitus cycle. The brain becomes less sensitive to internal noise, and the muscles around the head stay more relaxed throughout the day. People who combine the ear pressure technique with mindful breathing or posture corrections often find that their tinnitus episodes fade faster and return less often. The Japanese doctor explains that tinnitus is not just an ear issue, it is a full-body response. When the mind is calm and the posture is aligned, the structures around the ear function smoothly. But when stress and tension dominate, the ear becomes reactive and overstimulated. This is why addressing stress and posture is just as important as using the technique itself. It creates an environment where the body can rebalance naturally, allowing the ringing to soften and lose its intensity over time. The more relaxed the body becomes, and the more aligned the posture stays, the less power tinnitus has to disturb someone's daily life.